in the newspapers or you hear on them, that, of course, there will have been, people would have been prepared for this. I don't think so.
What happens when tradition collides with shifting power inside the world's most closely watched monarchy? In recent months, Queen Camilla's presence has noticeably faded from the royal spotlight. But was this a quiet repositioning, or something more deliberate? As Princess Anne and Princess Catherine step into leading roles, questions arise about Camilla's future. Did Anne's subtle influence spark a reset within the palace? Has Camilla been quietly pushed aside in favor of a new royal era? And what does this silent shift reveal about the direction of King Charles's reign? It was supposed to be one of the most unifying moments in recent royal history, a day that marked a new chapter for the British monarchy. On 6 May 2023, King Charles III was officially crowned in a historic coronation ceremony at Westminster Abbey. The air was filled with pageantry, centuries-old traditions, and a sense of national reflection. But beneath the surface of celebration, something else was stirring. The coronation did not just mark the rise of a new monarch. It quietly revealed cracks within the royal family that had long been forming, subtle tensions that many had overlooked until they became impossible to ignore. One of the most talked about changes that day was how Queen Camilla, previously styled as Queen Consort, was referred to simply as Queen Camilla in the official coronation program. While Buckingham Palace insisted this was a natural transition of titles, the move raised eyebrows. After all, when Queen Elizabeth II had publicly stated her wish for Camilla to be known as Queen Consort upon Charles's ascension, it was seen as a careful compromise, one that acknowledged public sensitivities following decades of media scrutiny and the lingering legacy of Princess Diana. The coronation ceremony itself was carried out with the highest degree of ceremony. Camilla was crowned alongside Charles, holding her own orb and scepter, wearing Queen Mary's crown. For some observers, it was a powerful image of continuity. But for others, it felt like a leap too far. In public forums and across British and international media, a debate was already beginning to take shape. Had the palace misjudged the public mood? Was this swift transition from Queen Consort to Queen an overstep? These were not just questions from online commentators. Reputable news outlets like the British Broadcasting Corporation, The Guardian, and ITV News began unpacking the public reaction. Some pointed to the historical precedent of the title Queen Consort being retained, while others argued that Camilla had earned her place after years of service and quiet dignity. But among the British public, opinion was far from united. A YouGov poll conducted just before the coronation showed that fewer than 15% of respondents wanted Camilla to be called Queen, with many still emotionally tied to the memory of Diana, Princess of Wales. Behind palace walls, these conversations did not go unnoticed. While no public statements were made by senior royals, body language, presence, or lack thereof, began telling its own story. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, took on a prominent role during the coronation. Known for her stoic dedication to royal duty and her respect for tradition, Anne was assigned the ceremonial role of gold stick-in-waiting, tasked with protecting the monarch during the event. It was a largely symbolic duty, but one steeped in historical weight. Anne's visibility on the day was interpreted by some royal commentators as more than ceremonial. It was a reminder of where traditional authority and loyalty to the crown truly lay. At no point did Anne make direct reference to Camilla in any public forum. But what could be seen again and again was her unwavering commitment to the institution over individual agendas. Her calm presence stood in quiet contrast to the more controversial narrative surrounding Camilla's elevated title. The media took note, and so did the public. In the weeks that followed, the coronation footage was replayed countless times across television networks, dissected in online videos and podcasts, and analyzed in print columns. Subtle cues, like who stood next to whom, who spoke to whom, and for how long, became points of discussion. In this environment, the line between public image and internal dynamics grew thinner, and slowly, Camilla's position at the center of the royal frame began to shift, not through declarations, but through gradual public reception. As summer approaches, royal watchers noticed a clear shift in tone. Camilla's presence remained formal, but slightly more reserved. The media continued covering her engagements, yet the emotional connection between her and the public seemed more muted. In contrast, Princess Catherine and Princess Anne were increasingly positioned as the public faces of the monarchy. Both were regularly seen at high-profile engagements, both domestic and international, embodying a blend of tradition and modern appeal. Where Camilla once stood as a symbol of Charles's steadfast support system, the narrative now seemed to quietly reposition her as a secondary figure. Still, no announcements were made. Nothing in the official record suggested a change in roles or responsibilities, but those observing closely could sense it. Something within the internal balance of royal power was shifting. And unlike past royal crises, this one unfolded not with scandal, but through silence. By the time summer had settled over the United Kingdom in 2023, the monarchy found itself navigating not a crisis of scandal, but one of perception. The coronation had come and gone, but its echoes remained in headlines, talk shows, and public sentiment. While King Charles and Queen Camilla continued their royal engagements, the focus of both the press and the public began to gradually pivot. It wasn't a dramatic shift. There were no fiery statements or abrupt disappearances. Instead, it was something quieter, a subtle repositioning of roles within the family, one that played out through who appeared where, who spoke when, and who stood in which place. The attention surrounding Queen Camilla's role didn't fade completely, but it began to evolve. Rather than being framed as a co-monarch in spirit, the narrative now leaned more toward Camilla being a support figure beside King Charles, rather than a central player in shaping the future of the institution. Meanwhile, Princess Catherine and Princess Anne became increasingly prominent in official royal duties. From charitable events to diplomatic receptions, the two women were often positioned at the forefront of the monarchy's public image. Anne, as ever, maintained her unwavering schedule of service. Known as one of the hardest-working royals, she continued to represent the crown with her signature sense of duty and discipline. Catherine, on the other hand, embodied the monarchy's evolving face, balancing tradition with relatability, royal protocol with modern presence. The difference wasn't lost on royal observers. Camilla's presence remained steady, but less commanding. Some royal correspondents noted that her public engagements appeared more curated, focusing on select causes rather than broad ceremonial roles. It wasn't unusual for Camilla to attend literary or domestic violence awareness events because she had long championed, but there was a growing sense that the palace was refining the scope of her visibility. Public sentiment, too, remained mixed. While Camilla had gained a measure of acceptance since her early days in the royal spotlight, polling still showed a generational divide. Older Britons were more likely to accept her role, citing her loyalty to King Charles and her understated public persona. Younger Britons, however, continued to express a preference for Princess Diana's legacy and voiced stronger support for William and Catherine as the monarchy's future. The press reflected this division. Certain papers praised Camilla's resilience and highlighted her commitment to service. Others questioned the wisdom of allowing the Queen Consort title to be quietly phased out. While there was no formal declaration from the palace about the shift in titles, the wording in official materials, from social media posts to event listings, consistently referred to her as the Queen. This detail, while small, continued to feed the public's curiosity and discomfort. Amid this landscape, Princess Anne maintained her quiet strength. During this period, she gave a series of interviews, including a noteworthy conversation with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. In the interview, broadcast in late spring, Anne discussed the challenges of a slimmed-down monarchy. She expressed concern about the risks of reducing the working royal family too dramatically, cautioning against losing the institutional knowledge and continuity required to carry out public duties effectively. Although Anne never named anyone directly, her message resonated. Some media interpreted it as a subtle critique of efforts to modernize too rapidly. Others read between the lines, suggesting that Anne was reinforcing the idea that roles should be earned through service, not simply granted through title. Her words carried weight, not because they were explosive, but because they came from someone who had spent her entire adult life upholding the monarchy through quiet, consistent dedication. It was in these moments that the contrast between Anne and Camilla became more visible. Not in conflict, not in scandal, but in principle. Anne's approach to royal duty had always been shaped by discipline, privacy, and continuity. Camilla's rise, by contrast, was more recent and entangled with decades of public controversy. The difference wasn't just historical, it was cultural. As autumn approaches, several royal watchers pointed out that Camilla's role in major royal events appeared increasingly ceremonial. At state visits and national engagements, she accompanied King Charles, but rarely led. Meanwhile, Catherine and Anne frequently undertook engagements solo, representing the crown with full authority. In the official photographs released after such events, their prominence spoke volumes. Still, within the palace, nothing was formally announced. Royal transitions often happen not with announcements, but with routines changing, schedules shifting, and the media adjusting its coverage. The absence of an official statement does not always mean the absence of a decision. It simply reflects the monarchy's preference for gradualism over disruption. Throughout this period, Camilla remained a figure of loyalty to King Charles. The couple appeared together frequently, with Camilla often seen offering support during public moments. She continued to carry out her patronages and host receptions. But as the months passed, her presence became more defined by tradition than transformation. It was not a removal. It was not an expulsion. But it was a shift, one that reflected the evolving landscape of the royal family, the voices gaining prominence, and the legacy being shaped for the years ahead. As winter approached and the royal calendar moved toward the year's final stretch, subtle but undeniable changes continued to shape the public image of the monarchy. The coronation was now several months behind them, but its effects had not faded. Instead, it had triggered a quiet recalibration within the House of Windsor, one that was becoming increasingly visible in the way royal duties were distributed and who the press was beginning to frame as the monarchy's enduring figures. By November 2023, public attention had shifted significantly toward Princess Catherine and Princess Anne. Both had taken on a growing number of solo engagements, particularly in areas that signaled long-term institutional leadership. Whether representing the crown at international summits, engaging with military units, or supporting major national charities, they stood out not only in presence, but in narrative. Headlines began to refer to Catherine as the future of the monarchy, and Anne as the monarchy's backbone. While Queen Camilla remained active in her role, particularly in causes close to her heart, literacy, domestic violence awareness, osteoporosis, her schedule had become noticeably more tailored. She no longer appeared as frequently at events requiring large-scale ceremonial representation or international diplomacy. When she did, it was usually alongside King Charles, and even then, the media coverage often centered on the king himself, or on younger royals, seen as leading the next generation. Observers who followed the royal rota closely noted that Camilla's public position seemed to be settling into something more symbolic. This wasn't a demotion by decree. Buckingham Palace issued no statement, and there was no formal reduction in her title or responsibilities. But in practice, Camilla was no longer at the center of the monarchy's forward-facing agenda. This development was not framed as scandalous, nor was it fueled by tabloid speculation. It was simply reflected in the rhythm of public life. Photographers began capturing fewer standalone moments of the Queen. Royal correspondents, once focused on her transition into the role of Queen Consort, began writing more about the influence of William, Catherine, and Anne. Even on the palace's own social media platforms, engagement posts highlighting Camilla's activities were less frequent and received less traction. Within this environment, one royal figure's voice carried new weight: Princess Anne. Her presence had always been steady, but by late 2023, it had become influential in a way that felt particularly timely. During a recorded conversation aired by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation earlier that year, Anne had addressed questions about a slimmed-down monarchy and the risks that come with reducing too many working members too quickly. She did not name anyone. She did not speak with hostility. But her remarks struck a chord. They were seen as a reflection of her long-standing belief in duty, structure, and earned positions. As more royal commentators revisited her interview, many began linking her views to the quiet reshuffling taking place behind the scenes. Anne's commitment had always been action-oriented, not rhetorical. Her schedule remained among the busiest in the family, She often visited parts of the country that received little royal attention and supported causes that rarely made headlines. But that consistency had earned her something invaluable: public respect. And as questions around leadership and legacy grew louder, that respect began translating into influence. At the same time, Camilla was navigating her own set of challenges. Though there was no suggestion of personal health concerns at this stage, there were signs that the role of Queen was not as publicly central as once expected. In coverage of major engagements, particularly those involving state matters or sensitive diplomatic events, her presence was either supporting or absent entirely. It became increasingly clear that while she remained by King Charles's side, personally and publicly, she was not being positioned as a long-term institutional leader. That mantle, whether intentionally or gradually, was shifting elsewhere. Royal analysts were careful in how they described this change. No one suggested a rift. There were no stories of confrontation. But there was a consensus growing among those who followed the monarchy closely. The senior royal roles were undergoing a quiet redistribution. The weight of representation, particularly for the future, was now being carried by Catherine and Anne. For Camilla, this meant her time in the spotlight was evolving. Once the focus of public interest for her controversial path into the royal family, and later her transformation into queen consort, she now appeared more reserved. Some commentators saw this as a natural conclusion to a complex chapter. Camilla had fulfilled her role during the transition of reign, and now, with the monarchy stabilized, her position was becoming more ceremonial. But for others, particularly longtime followers of the institution, it raised questions. Why had her visibility declined so swiftly after the coronation? Was it simply the shifting focus toward younger royals? Or did Anne's quietly firm stance on earned service carry more weight behind the scenes? The truth, perhaps, lay in a combination of both. The monarchy was adapting, as it always has. But this time, adaptation didn't come through a crisis. It came through rebalancing. And in that rebalancing, a quiet shift had taken place. One that repositioned Queen Camilla not by dismissal, but by design. As the new year unfolded, the rhythm of royal life continued, but with a noticeably different tone. The transition that had been quietly brewing throughout the previous months was no longer subtle, it was being felt. Public-facing responsibilities once shared or supported by Queen Camilla were now more frequently handled by Princess Anne and Princess Catherine, and the press began framing this development not as temporary, but as indicative of a long-term strategic direction. By January 2024, the reshuffling of duties within the royal family was evident in the calendar of engagements. Princess Anne opened the year with a packed schedule, continuing her long-standing commitment to regional visits, charitable outreach, and ceremonial duties. She was a constant presence, embodying the values of service and discipline that had defined her royal career for over 5 decades. Media outlets described her as the monarchy's most reliable anchor, and her visibility was not only consistent, it was respected. Princess Catherine also maintained a firm public presence, especially in mental health initiatives and child development campaigns. Her role in shaping the monarchy's modern image had never been clearer. She engaged confidently with schools, healthcare professionals, and community organizations, making headlines not for what she wore or said, but for the issues she championed. Her work with the Royal Foundation Center for Early Childhood was frequently highlighted, positioning her as more than a royal figurehead. She was being seen as an architect of the monarchy's future direction. In contrast, Queen Camilla's public role had noticeably narrowed. While she continued to support causes such as reading programs and domestic abuse awareness, both of which she had been involved with for years, her visibility outside those initiatives was reduced. Her name appeared less frequently in media reports about royal engagements, and when she did feature, it was largely in the context of events shared with King Charles. The palace, true to its character, made no official declarations about these shifts. Royal transitions rarely come with headlines or press briefings. They are observed in patterns: who appears where, who speaks on behalf of whom, and how the palace communicates through its official channels. On the monarchy's social media accounts and websites, posts about Catherine and Anne increased in both frequency and depth. Meanwhile, posts about Queen Camilla became more selective and focused, centered on her established patronages. For royal correspondents, the interpretation was clear. The institution was stabilizing around its most trusted and forward-facing figures, and those figures were no longer centered around Camilla. This was not a removal. There was no scandal, no controversy, but it was, undeniably, a recalibration. Much of the public's understanding of this shift came not from official announcements, but from what was said, carefully, and often indirectly, by Princess Anne. In a particularly discussed moment, Anne's interview with Canadian Broadcasting Corporation resurfaced online and was reanalyzed by multiple outlets. Her caution about slimming down the working royal family too drastically had struck a nerve. In the context of Camilla's reduced visibility, her words now seemed even more pointed. Anne had not made accusations. She had not spoken critically about anyone. But her insistence on merit, experience, and service as the foundations of royal duty resonated at a time when roles were clearly being reassessed. To many observers, it seemed that Anne's perspective had guided a broader understanding within the palace that positions within the monarchy should be continually earned, not simply held. This growing sentiment was echoed in the way the public engaged with the royal family. While Camilla had been largely accepted over the years through her steady commitment and support of King Charles, there remained a clear emotional divide. Diana's legacy continued to cast a long shadow, particularly among younger generations, and many members of the public expressed stronger admiration for Catherine's natural ease in public settings and Anne's unwavering consistency. It is important to note that Queen Camilla had not been pushed aside. She remained at King Charles's side during key state events and continued to play her part in maintaining the stability of the monarchy during the early months of his reign. But her public role had become one of quiet support rather than shared leadership. In state photographs, her position remained present, but her prominence had softened. Her speeches were fewer. Her solo appearances are rarer. The palace's strategic messaging made it clear, while Camilla remained an important presence, she was no longer the face of the monarchy's evolving identity. Internally, the royal family presented a united front. There were no visible fractures, no divisive optics. But beneath the surface, the palace's actions reflected a larger truth. The monarchy, rooted in tradition, was slowly but deliberately pivoting toward its next generation of stewards. It was Anne and Catherine, not Camilla, who were leading that quiet transformation. As spring approached, the monarchy's shifting dynamic was no longer just observed by insiders or royal commentators. It had become part of the broader public narrative. The quiet recalibration that had taken shape over the previous year was now being reflected in how the monarchy was represented across institutions, ceremonies, and public messaging. Queen Camilla, once at the center of attention during King Charles's coronation, now occupied a more restrained space within the royal structure. And while there was no formal announcement to signal the change, it was undeniable. Royal engagements throughout February and March of 2024 made the contrast even more apparent. Princess Anne continued to lead from the front, fulfilling a relentless schedule across the United Kingdom. Whether attending agricultural conferences, visiting regional charities, or presiding over military ceremonies, her presence was a constant reminder of duty carried out without flourish or demand for praise. Her understated approach and long-standing record of service had long earned her the public's admiration. But now, her visibility also reflected strategic trust from the palace. Princess Catherine's role, too, was more firmly defined than ever. She took on new patronages, spoke on national platforms, and continued to work closely with early years initiatives. Her ability to connect with people of all ages made her a natural figurehead for a modernizing institution. With each engagement, Catherine reinforced her position not only as the Princess of Wales, but as someone capable of shaping the monarchy's relevance in a changing world. Media coverage, from the Times to the British Broadcasting Corporation, increasingly highlighted her work as central to the royal family's long-term image. Against this backdrop, Queen Camilla's public role settled into a more supportive framework. While she maintained her private engagements and charitable commitments, her absence from higher-profile appearances did not go unnoticed. Events that previously might have featured Camilla as a principal figure now saw Catherine or Anne leading the royal presence. Camilla remained visible beside King Charles during certain state events, but even in these moments, the public and media focus shifted elsewhere. It was not a demotion in title or standing, she remained queen. But in terms of influence, representation, and forward momentum, the focus had moved on. The evolution of roles within the monarchy had been handled with characteristic subtlety. No statements, no public disputes, just a gradual rearrangement of faces, responsibilities, and headlines. Behind palace gates, sources close to royal correspondence noted that the adjustment was not abrupt, but part of a longer-term understanding. Queen Camilla had fulfilled her most crucial role, guiding King Charles into the early months of his reign with calm support and dignity. With that transition complete, the monarchy was naturally turning toward its next era, led by those who would carry it into the future. The symbolic weight of this transition was perhaps most visible during Commonwealth Day events in early March. While King Charles was notably absent due to ongoing health management, Princess Catherine and Princess Anne represented the family at Westminster Abbey. Camilla did not attend. The optics were clear. Anne and Catherine were the monarchy's visible stewards during a period of national significance. Their presence was not just ceremonial, it was strategic. For many members of the public, this new arrangement felt not only appropriate, but necessary. As British society continues to change, so too must the institutions that represent it. The monarchy's survival depends not only on tradition, but on its ability to respond to the expectations of the people it serves. The growing prominence of Anne and Catherine reflects a shift toward reliability, connection, and a kind of leadership shaped by consistent action rather than status alone. In this new chapter, Queen Camilla remains a part of the royal family, but her role has returned to something quieter, more personal. The center stage she occupied during the coronation has since dimmed, not through scandal, but through rebalancing. Her influence, once closely watched, has given way to others whose voices and visibility now define the institution's day-to-day identity. This evolution mirrors how the monarchy has always adapted, not through revolution, but through recalibration. Power within the royal family is rarely taken or given through dramatic turns. Instead, it shifts subtly, influenced by public sentiment, institutional needs, and the quiet actions of those who serve. In the case of Queen Camilla, her transition reflects a monarchy that values presence over position, service over symbolism. Her journey, from controversial figure to queen, and now to a more private partner in the reign of King Charles, illustrates just how much the role of royalty is shaped by the moment in history it inhabits. No one needed to say that Queen Camilla had stepped back. The institution had simply moved forward, placing its trust in those who embody its next chapter. And in doing so, it reminded the world that the crown, more than any single person, is always looking ahead. That brings us to the end of today's breakdown. If you followed the story this far, you clearly care about the bigger picture, so make sure to check out the other videos on the channel.